another episode of Raising Your Real Estate IQ. And I just wanted to be sure to, just introduce Philippe Heller from the Real Estate Inspection Company. He's chatting with us today about home inspections and everything that you need to know about staying safe, saving money, kind of just being informed. So really excited to have you on. Thank you so much for being here. And
thank you. Glad to share.
If you're ready, let's jump in.
Sure.
All right, awesome. So for those of us who maybe haven't purchased a home in a while or have never purchased a home, can you tell us a little bit about what a home inspection is and, just kind of what's entailed in it?
Sure, no problem. Home inspections are a relatively new service, if you will. They really started in the 80s, and buyers prior to that would just buy a house and hope for the best, and it was just buyer beware, and you were stuck with whatever you found. Then people started getting smart, and they started asking a contractor or somebody knowledgeable to come and check out a house to see if it was in good condition, because they don't want to get stuck with a lot of problems. And that was the genesis of the home inspection industry. People saw a need for it. They decided, hey, I think there's a business opportunity here, and I can work for buyers and help protect them and use our knowledge to convey that to a buyer and really give them an honest evaluation of the condition of a house. And so that's what we do. It's evolved dramatically. We've been in business for about 16 years, and I can tell you just from the time we started in 2004, new tools and technologies and report software have come out, and it really has become an instrumental part of the transaction so that buyers and real estate agents protect themselves from liability and unforeseen costs. And that's really the reason you want to do it, is to not be saddled with a large repair after you purchase a home.
And I know a client of ours just recently walked into a house and it looked amazing. Like from the lay person's perspective, it was everything they wanted. And they hired your company to come out, take a look, and there was a 70-page report, which sometimes the reports are longer, but the things within those pages were very concerning. And I don't recall the exact amount, but I think the total before the buyer decided to back out of escrow because the seller wouldn't help, I think the total was about $26,000 in repairs. So it's, well, it looks fine, or I'm sure I've got this. It's like, well, maybe I just want to dive a little deeper and making sure that we truly understand. So it's not always what it seems, I guess.
Yeah, and that's kind of a new phenomenon that we saw after the 08-09 crash, is the advent of flippers getting in and buying very inexpensive homes at foreclosure. And many flip houses are great. And it's so cool to see old neighborhoods have people come in and rehab houses and really revitalize the neighborhood. But you also have the people who are just trying to make a quick buck. And they came in and they made a place look great. But when you looked at it with experienced eyes and you saw that there were, no receptacles installed in the laundry room, and there were leaks in the cast iron plumbing, things like that, we realized, hey, there's a problem here, because these flippers are coming in, painting, putting new counters and appliances. It just looked awesome. People loved it. And as soon as they moved in, they started finding a lot of problems. So not all flip houses are bad, but you really need to check them out and make sure that the work was done properly.
Definitely. And what does a home inspection usually entail? Like, what will the home inspector look at and do while they're there at the property?
Sure. Well, it actually involves thousands of points that the inspector's looking at. They come in and they'll take pictures of everything, kind of get the lay of the house, make sure they know where all the bathrooms are and kind of understand how the house works. Then they'll go through, and all of our guys follow a specific routine, and we've developed that over the years to make sure that, number one, they don't miss anything, and number two, certain items need to be checked so that you can see other defects. For example, you have to run the plumbing before we scan with thermal imaging to see if there's leaks. So you want to run the tubs and the showers and the sinks and flush the toilets, so that then you can go through with our thermal image cameras and see, especially in 2-story houses, if there's any leaking in the ceiling beneath the plumbing fixtures. So we check everything from the appliances to the electrical systems, plumbing systems, heating and air, all the receptacles and switches, We get in the attic to look at the ductwork, insulation, evidence of leaks at the roof. We'll get on the roof. We'll crawl under the house if it has a crawl space to check for structure, look at the foundation, posts and piers, see if there's water intrusion. So every component of the house is really gone through and checked. And, you know, there's so much, this is where the knowledge and the experience comes in. So when an inspector goes into an attic, for example, they can look around and know whether the venting is correct for the bathrooms, for example, or if the ductwork for the heating and air conditioning system is adequate or might be leaking. So they're looking at just dozens and dozens of things in every part of the house.
Yep, definitely. And it's kind of nice. And if you're all right with it, I'll show just a quick overview of how your reports are laid out. It's going to take me a second. There we go. So it's kind of nice how it's so organized, and you literally can go section by section, or at the end of the report, there's a summary. But I don't know, you haven't seen this whole report yourself, but let's just pick a section to go to really quickly.
Click in the cooling section, for example.
Okay. Oh, this one doesn't have an AC. But
okay. There you go. Not present. The thing that
will work. Okay.
As you mentioned, a report might be 70 pages. As things have evolved, home inspectors have started to document a lot more stuff in home inspection. This is a great page. Let's hold on this for a second. But we document not only the defects, but we'll also document things that are working properly. And this is also very important if a seller is going to have a pre-listing inspection. You know, this way, either the buyer or the seller can prove it's been documented that something's working. And that's very important if a buyer has a home warranty claim shortly after they move in. Home warranty companies are notorious for turning down claims, but you may just move into a house, now it's cold, and your furnace doesn't work. And here you can see an example of documentation with photographs and a thermal image that the furnace was tested, the flame was on, and we can see heat coming out of the register. So by doing this, even though everything was working fine, we've documented the proper operation so that if a home warranty were to deny, and it's usually not the home warranty company, it's the subcontractor that they send out. And very often, unfortunately, they want to circumvent the home warranty because they make more money. And so they'll immediately say, this isn't covered and you got to pay me directly and I can fix it. This documents that this furnace was working at the time of the inspection and can really hold the home warranty to task and make sure that they get repairs done. So you want to get a report that documents the things that are functioning properly, not just the defects.
Yes, and I love the fact that I've seen so many reports. Yours is so thorough, which I think is great, because a lot of reports I've seen, they actually just mark inspected, non-inspected, you know, not present, or there's a request. Like they'll just mark this and you're like, okay, but there's no pictures, there's no explanation, and it's just kind of not that helpful. So even though this report is long, this was of a pre-listing inspection that we did on a house. You know, it's a pretty long report, but it's not because there's bad things. It's just because you guys are so thorough. So it's like a long report isn't always a terrible thing, but it's kind of nice because you could just literally click and see things where you guys got up on the roof and there was a little crack here or there, and you know,
click on the pictures. You should be able to zoom in so you can get an expanded view. You can see that the ridge shingles here are cracked. And obviously that's going to lead to a leak eventually. So it may not be leaking today, but this is very important. So it's nice to be able to zoom in on some of those pictures so you can really kind of see where, you know, what the defect is.
Yeah, and it's great because at the end, and let's see if we can, oh, here we go. Here is a summary now. I mean, we have all the wonderful pictures, and then there's like a great summary of everything in one spot. And then as a real estate agent, a thorough inspection report is going to give me what I need to work with a buyer to try to work out details with the seller of repairs that can get done. Because as you know, in California, homes are sold as is. So the better support we have to show, which includes pictures and details, because we could say, oh, there's cracks on the roof and blah, blah, blah. They're like, hey, the roof is fine. It's never leaked. Well, now I go back to that photo and they could click in close and see. It's like, you know, it's just really kind of neat how it gives us a lot of leverage. And sometimes buyers want to, this is you guys checking the receptacles. I love that you take pictures of all of them.
It's important, like even that roof, for example, it's not leaking. So a seller could say, it's not leaking, it's fine, it's functional. Yeah. But what is important is, as you mentioned, houses are sold as is. The buyer, at least, I think, deserves, you can't use as is as an excuse. Well, then let's not get a home inspection because the seller is not going to repair anything anyway. You still want to know things that may cost you money coming up in the next year or 5 years even. So let's say that roof now, it's not leaking today, but it's clearly at the end of its life. It clearly needs at least repair, if not a full replacement. So it's smart for the buyer to maybe get a roofer out there and say, hey, look, come out, give me a quote so I know what to budget so I can replace this roof before this coming winter. And that's why even if the seller's not going to help you with the price, it's still very important to have that information so you know what you're in for in the next year or so.
Yep, exactly. And that's what happened. We ended up helping negotiate, luckily not a full roof replacement, which is what they were asking for, but we were able to work out something that we gave a 3-year roof cert and from a company and gave a little credit to help towards that, which they were anticipating for the future. So yeah, it's great to have the ability to use your reports, which are so detailed, to negotiate or even just be aware. So that's awesome. Okay, that was just our first question. So let's jump into the next one because we've got a lot of stuff to share. So what do you think are some of the biggest surprises that buyers find if they don't actually have a thorough inspection?
Oh gosh, they'll find, especially on a flip home, that maybe some receptacles don't work. And those are usually pretty easy repairs, but more significantly would be an air conditioning unit that's not functional because those can be costly to repair. A roof that leaks, significant plumbing defects, even a water heater now. To have a plumber come out and install even just a traditional tank water heater can be $1,500 to $2,500 if it's done up to code. And after buying a house, I know, and moving, and people don't always have a lot of money, $2,500 could be significant to them. So those are really some of the, off the top, some of the real quick things that can be discovered after somebody moves in, had they not had a thorough home inspection. Beyond that, it could be way more significant. There could be issues in the crawl space, such as old cast iron plumbing that's completely rusted and leaking under the house. If they don't have a drain line inspection, they could find a $6,000 to $10,000 section that's buried under the driveway that needs to be repaired. All of a sudden, that becomes very expensive because you're cutting the driveway, you're digging up this pipe, you're sometimes having to go out in the street. So those are the really costly things that can turn up without a proper inspection of all the systems.
Yep. And that actually reminds me, I ended up helping a buyer a few years back who I met him at an open house, and he said, I'm just going to work with a listing agent. That's my plan. I'm just working with a listing agent. I don't need a buyer's agent to help me. I can get to Zillow. I could do everything myself. And he was a smart guy. Well, after kind of having some struggles, he ended up calling me and saying, hey, will you help me? And it's not, see, there's 2 parts to the whole picture, I think. It's knowing the information and then knowing what to do with it is the second part. Because, yeah, I mean, knowledge is power. There's no doubt about that. That's the most important part, I'd say. But with him, he ended up with our home inspector established that there was something funky going on in the attic, and they actually forgot to tell us they took a wall down. But then they were like, it's a non-load bearing wall, but we put a beam in. And I said, well, why would you put a beam in or a header if it wasn't load bearing? And then like, and it was a flipper. They backpedaled, and then like, wait, actually it was load bearing, and here's some more information. And it's like, it was great that the home inspector alerted us to know to look a little closer because he was up in the attic and noticed something funky. But again, it's something, the second and not most important, but important step is then what do you do with it and how do you ask? And in the end too, in that house, there was a plumbing issue in the cast iron that we needed to have fixed. And they were trying to say, no, it's fine. And my client at the very end of this whole story said, I know a lot about a lot of things, and I'm a very smart person, but I probably wouldn't have known to push back on both of these items because the listing agent would have just told me it was fine. And I would have been like, it's fine. It's more than just having the info sometimes. So anyways, that was
the cost of the inspection in retrospect, when you look at the concessions that you secured for that buyer, the home inspection is a small price to pay, because imagine if there was a problem and they had to hire even just an architect or a structural engineer for that beam issue, or had they not, done that right, that could cost $1,500 just to get somebody out there. So the cost of home inspection is relatively inexpensive when you compare it to, oh my gosh, after the fact, getting somebody out there to figure this out for you.
Definitely. And I know that can obviously vary with a lot of factors, but what does a home inspection generally kind of run for, let's like the most entry level?
Yeah, for, let's say a house around 2,000 square feet is about $495 now. And there's some add-ons to that. If the sewer scopes are usually extra, pools, guest houses, barns, those kinds of things are usually extra. But they'll range from like $450 to $500 is usually the starting point for a home. Condos obviously are a little bit less expensive.
Great, wonderful. Well, thank you. Yeah, that's going to save them enough, just in peace of mind, let alone getting repairs. So that's great. Yeah. Okay, so one of the things we were also talking about, and we just spoke about cast iron. Obviously, not all houses in all eras have cast iron, but I thought it would be really fun to just hit on really quick. And this could apply not only to buyers who are wanting to be aware of this, but also owners who maybe didn't know, because I've had sellers before kind of aloof to certain things that are very important about their house, that when they go to disclose information, they forgot or didn't understand. Yeah. So maybe there's a homeowner out there right now that wants to hear this list that we're going to talk about and just be aware of some considerations that the different eras of housing have. And I'm going to put up my little banner that I created. There we go.
Yeah, just like a car. I use that analogy quite a bit. If you go back to the 50s or 40s or 70s, the technology and the methods that they used to build cars changed dramatically. The safety features in cars changed dramatically. Power steering, power brakes, anti-lock brakes, seat belts. Before, in the early 60s and before, cars didn't even have to have seat belts in them. So, things became safer along the way. Same thing with houses. Back in the day, say in the 40s, and remember that even prior to the 1920s, a lot of houses didn't even have plumbing. They had an outhouse in the back. And you will see downtown in some of the older neighborhoods, you'll see plumbing that was installed on the exterior of the house. That's because that house may not have had plumbing when it was originally built, and it was added later. So if you keep that in mind, houses don't have to be upgraded to today's code ever, except for very few things, which we'll talk about in a minute. So if you're buying a house that was built in the 50s, which are very common, the post-war boom in San Diego after World War II, tens of thousands of homes were built in the 50s. And they're charming, they're near downtown, people love them. But you have to understand that during that era, construction methods and the products used have changed dramatically. Those houses may not have had insulation. Those houses didn't have forced air or forced heat. They had a simple wall furnace. They may have lead in the paint, single pane windows, things like that. They don't have GFCI receptacles, which is a big safety improvement. They don't have a lot of the things, depends on the furnace. A lot of the building code is specifically geared towards fire safety. It's to keep your house from catching on fire and killing people. It's not to save the structure necessarily. It's to save human life. So as these building codes evolve, egress, window sills are much lower now than they were in the 50s and 40s. This is very hard for an old person or a child to get out of a window if the house was on fire. So little things like that we try and educate buyers on. And we have a series of white papers that we give out for free. You can go on our website and get them, that talks about houses built in the different eras and things to look for. Even things as simple as old electrical panels. In the 50s and 60s, we just simply didn't have all the electronic stuff that we do today. So there are far fewer receptacles. There might only be one in the bedroom, because people back then, they had a light and maybe a clock next to the bed. That was it. They didn't have computers and video games and TVs and plugging in their iPhones and their electronic watches and all these things. So all this stuff has evolved.
Yeah, definitely. And so 70s, what would that be? Asbestos, right?
Still some asbestos through 79. There was lead in the paint through about the same time when they banned it. really the key thing is if the paint is in good condition or it has been painted over and encapsulated, it's not really a risk. Same thing with asbestos. It's only when it breaks up or the paint peels and there's a risk of eating it, or the paint chips have fallen into the soil and you're going to plant some vegetables right up against the house. Obviously, that's a health risk. So in addition, the 70s still didn't have a lot of the GFCI receptacles. They didn't have as big of electrical panels. Most houses by the end of the 70s did have insulation in them in San Diego, but they still didn't have double pane windows. So little things like that. We consider like mid to late 60s the modern house. So it had circuit breakers. It had a lot more of the safety features that we still see today. Prior to that, houses were a little riskier, if you will.
Okay, and then in the 80s, what were some of the things to be concerned about or be aware of for the 80s?
Sure. Well, the 80s is when tract housing really took hold. And so you had these, big developments with hundreds and maybe thousands of houses going in. So developers were really conscious about saving money on each home, because you multiply that out by 1,000. If you can save $1,000 on every house, it can quickly add up to millions of dollars. One of the things in the 80s that turned out to be a very poor decision was the installation of polybutylene plumbing instead of copper plumbing. So copper plumbing required a licensed plumber to come and, cut the pipe, solder it, do all the stuff. Polybutylene is a gray tubing. It's a plastic material that could easily be run. It didn't require a licensed plumber to install. It was it wasn't glued together, but it was fitted together kind of like a drip system in the garden, where they would fit it together and put a crimp on it to hold it all together. Well, it turns out that the water in Southern California and the chemicals we use to treat the water would damage all of the fittings in these polybutylene plumbing systems. And since that plumbing supply is under pressure, these fittings would corrode, they would dry out, they would break and flood the houses. So there was a massive lawsuit against Chevron, who created the product, and they were paying people money so that they could repipe their house back to copper again. And so one of the biggest things we look for in houses built from early to mid 80s all the way through to the mid 90s is the presence of polybutylene plumbing. And just to give you a range, to repipe a house is between $8,000 and $12,000. So it's a significant find, and you really do run the risk of having a flood in your house if you have polybutylene plumbing.
So it's kind of nice to have this as like a little bit of information in case you have your house is built in the 80s to mid 90s. Go back and see if you can uncover your home inspection report. If not, maybe consider having a plumber out just to check it out, because it's probably better to be a little bit more proactive than reactive in this whole way. So it's kind of nice. Okay, awesome. Well, that's really fun to know, and just kind of consider the different things. And I'm sure there's more, but we got to keep going.
There's a ton. Yeah.
I know we could talk for hours. This is the best thing. So, okay. Last major question I'm going to touch on today is for homeowners and sellers as well. So what are the 3 things that you think that a homeowner can do to either just maintain their home or prepare for a sale that will kind of help them with just being in the best position possible?
Well, for sellers, we do recommend a pre-listing inspection. And it's not just a sales pitch. I truly believe that this can save the sellers a lot of money. How does it do that? Well, if we come in for a seller and we say, let's look at your house, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you may not have been in your attic for 10 years, 20 years. Let us go up in there and look at the ductwork. Let us run the heat and AC. Let us do the tests that we would do for a buyer, so you will be aware of the things that we would find for a buyer. A great example is air conditioning. Let's say we perform a test and we find that the AC unit isn't cooling as well as it should. Well, if this is for a buyer, the buyer could come back and say, hey, look, your AC system's 20 plus years old, right? There are a lot of houses built in the 80s and 90s. They may say, we want a credit for a whole new system. But the seller could simply have that system serviced. Perhaps it just needs a charge of refrigerant. And by doing so, by spending a couple $100, it will make the system perform where it should be, so that when the buyer brings in an inspector, it's going to be tested, and nothing's going to be called out on it. So just that, spending a couple $100 servicing your heating and air conditioning systems can help you avoid potentially a request for $10,000 or $15,000 from a buyer who's buying your house. Have your roof looked at. There's a lot of things that go on, and really, who pays attention to their roof unless they have a leak? So let us get in the attic. Let us get up on the roof. Let's look at the skylights and the roof penetrations and get those addressed again before you have somebody coming and asking you for a credit for an entire new roof, because that could be $6,000 to $25,000 for a nice tile roof. So really smart for sellers to do that. So on the buyer side, you asked what was things
sellers. Yeah, what are the 3 things sellers could do? I know another one that we talked about was making sure that they're compliant with their smoke detectors, and that they also double check. And I was going to show everyone how to do that. That over here, but so if you have your smoke detectors, most of us don't really do too much with it. And I have a smoke detector and a CO2 and smoke detector in my house. And so tell us a little bit about what are we supposed to do to be compliant? Because I know it changed a couple of years ago, so most people are totally unaware of it.
Sure. As I said earlier, most building codes are not required to be upgraded. For example, a house built in 1960, the seller is not required to install GFCI receptacles. They just weren't required at the time of construction. The only things they do have to do, they do have to strap the water heater for seismic safety, so it doesn't, tip over in an earthquake. And the real risk there is not that you're going to spill some water; it's that you're going to rupture the gas line and cause a fire. And also, as you said, smoke detectors. Back then, into the 80s, houses really only required if it's a one-story house, one smoke detector in the common hallway. Over time, the current building code required smoke detectors and now carbon monoxide detectors to be installed in many more places. Smoke detectors now have to be in every bedroom because their purpose is to alert people. Again, it's a life safety thing. Alert you so that you have an opportunity to get out of the house and survive a fire. Even if the house burns down, you just need that advance notice so you have the time to get out. So now, regardless of the age of the home, sellers must install, and it's on the seller, they have to do this, install smoke detectors in every bedroom and in the hallway right outside the bedroom. And if you have a long ranch style house where there's bedrooms, masters on one side and the kids' bedrooms are at the other, you would need 2 hallway smoke detectors in addition to the bedrooms being covered. If you have multiple floors, you need at least 1 on each floor. Even if there are no bedrooms up there, you still need a smoke detector. And then carbon monoxide detectors now, the sellers need to put at least 1 on each level. So those are things that a seller just simply needs to take care of. And some great new products out.
It's nice to have a combo because that way you don't have a bunch of things sitting there. I mean, we have a single level home. So in our case, we've got the combo right outside the master. And then we've got a smoke detector in each bedroom right above the door because I've come into some houses and you walk in the door and the smoke detector's in the corner, like the opposite corner. And you have to think about where the smoke's going to have to get to before it'll go off. And by then it's a little too late. So right above the door is a good thing. But I wanted to show everyone, let me see if I can get this. There's a little button right here that is where we test it. And how often should we test?
I would say test it at least every 6 months. And if you have an older one with a 9-volt battery, you're probably going to want to take, they say an easy way to remember that is when you change your clocks, test your smoke detector and change that 9-volt battery. New smoke detectors and CO detectors are required to have a sealed 10-year battery so you never change it. And the reason why it's 10 years is because even old smoke detectors, if they're more than 10 years old, they're probably not going to be as sensitive and they're not going to sense a fire or the smoke very early. So if you have smoke detectors that are 10 years old or more, go ahead and replace them. And you'll see when you go and buy one, you don't need to buy a 9-volt battery. They're going to have a sealed button battery in there that's going to last 10 years. So I would still test it just to make sure that they're working. Some of the new, and we'll touch on this again a little bit later, but some of the new smart components, some of the smart CO and smoke detectors will test themselves and they'll notify you. But if you have a traditional one like yours, you simply push the button and make sure that you can hear the sound.
Yep. So I'm gonna do this real quick, okay?
Yep.
So this is just exactly how to do it. I know it sounds kind of silly, but it's like, why not? So push and hold to test is what it says. So I'm gonna do it. It's probably gonna get kind of loud. Oop. So that worked?
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
It beeped, and then we'll try this one.
Yeah, I'm gonna beep a few more. Do you have a hush button on it?
I do. I pushed it. Okay, good. So beeps, and then a couple more times it beeps, so we're good. So that's tested. It works. So that's as simple as it is. Maybe watching this video today, go do that at your house. Everybody should have smoke detectors, whether you're a homeowner or a renter. Check it out. And the same thing here. We'll just push that button. It says push to test weekly. Interesting. This one says weekly.
Weekly is a little probably overkill.
But so, hey. Good. All right. And there was one more thing you wanted to share too about how a homeowner can help with avoiding, and I guess this could be a renter, even anyone living in a house who has a dryer. And this is something I am for sure going to do as soon as I feel comfortable having somebody come to my house. I'm going to do this because I've never done it, and I know that it's so important. But why don't you share with us a little bit more about the tip on the dryer?
Yeah, dryer ducts. So everybody, if you have a clothes dryer in your house, some lint, you'll see all the lint that accumulates on that screen that you should be cleaning before every load. Always clean it out. You want as much air flowing through your dryer as possible to dry your clothes quickly. The faster your clothes dry, the less wear and tear it is, not only on the dryer, but on your clothes too, because they don't have to tumble as long. You're also going to save energy because it's not using as much gas. One of the things that happens though is a lot of that lint gets past that filter, and because it's damp and that exhaust from the dryer is very damp, you're going to get some buildup inside the duct that takes that air outside. And what happens over time is it starts to get restricted because so much lint collects in there. And that lint is highly, highly flammable. You can use it as kindling, as a matter of fact, to get a fire started. If you scrape that out, you can wad it up into a little ball and use it to start a fire in the fireplace, for example. So it's very flammable. And as it restricts, what it does is it causes the airflow to be reduced, raising the temperature beyond where it should be, which can actually damage your dryer and can start a house fire. There are a lot of house fires that start each year because of a dryer duct that just simply overheats, the lint combusts, and you start a fire in there and burn your house down or really damage your house. So get your ducts cleaned. If you haven't done it in 5 years or more, seriously, it's not expensive. It's probably $100-120. Just call a duct cleaning company. They usually do it. Sometimes chimney sweeps will do it. Get it cleaned. You're going to save money on gas and electricity. You're going to save your clothes, and you're going to avoid, your clothes are going to dry faster too. If you notice that you have to restart your dryer to really get your clothes dry, that should indicate that there is a problem with your duct and the air's not flowing. So get your duct cleaned.
Great. Well, thank you. So you had suggested, so checking your roof, checking your HVAC to make sure that you're servicing it regularly. That will end up helping to prolong the life, or even avoid the chances of a buyer maybe asking for a 12, 15, maybe 12 or $10,000 credit, something big. And then doing the smoke detectors and CO2 detectors, making sure that they're compliant and that you test them. And then the dryer duct cleaning. I think those are some really awesome.
Huge. Yeah. Those are,
that if you were watching the video at this point would be really, I don't know, helpful. So hopefully you guys take away something in that way so that you have some additional safety going on in your house. Okay, so the last thing we're going to talk about real quick before we wrap up is what are some hacks that you recommend that homeowners can do to help just make their home more efficient, and some things that they haven't heard about yet that you guys are working on kind of bringing more to the forefront?
Sure. Two things. First of all, home automation. You know, our smartphones have gotten so incredible, and we can do so many things with them, but we can also use them to control our house. You've probably heard the term smart house. And there are so many cool new things that you can get for your home, and you can even convert an old home to be a smart house. And it can be as simple as changing a thermostat or changing light switches and doing all sorts of stuff that you can really automate your home. And it's fantastic. Once you get used to your house being a little bit more intelligent and turning lights on for you, you'll love it. Like, I'm in the process of converting all my electrical switches and whatnot to Lutron switches, and you can program them. You can set scenes. You can have dimmers where you never had dimmers before. Turn on and off your exterior lights. It's really cool. But if you're at all interested in doing it, but you're a little intimidated, you can go and pick up a small device like this, and you can get them at Target or your local hardware store. And these simply plug into an outlet, and then you can plug a lamp into here, and then you connect it to your Wi-Fi, and usually you have to download an app or something. But then what you can do is you can program a light to come on and turn off whenever you want. You can either set it at sundown and sunrise, or turn it on at sundown and then turn off at 9 o'clock at night, whatever you want. It's just like the old vacation timers, except you don't have to reset it based on the time of year when sundown gets later and later and later during the summer, and then earlier and earlier. And so you're constantly chasing that. Now you can do that. You'll have a light that comes on at sundown. You never have to think about it. You can operate it from your cell phone from anywhere in the world. Beyond that, you can add thermostats. You can turn on your air conditioner or your heat before you get home. Or if you remember, I forgot to turn off my AC and I'm not going to be home for the weekend, you can adjust it from, again, anywhere in the world. And these systems are just really cool. So look into it. They're not expensive, and they can really make your life, I don't want to say easier, but just more comfortable, because your house is just that much more automated. So that's really cool. And then one of the new things that we are promoting at our company is we've partnered with a neat company out of Canada called Alert Labs. And they've set up a whole suite of products that help you monitor your water usage, and it learns your usage, and it can predict when you have a leak in your house and can shut off the water to avoid potentially tens of thousands of dollars in water damage. You had an ice maker line leak, right? And caused a lot of damage?
We ended up having not an ice maker line. It was, in our case, it wasn't our house, it was our neighbor upstairs. We had a leak come through from up there. So that maybe wouldn't have worked for us. But I have definitely heard about all kinds of situations where things come up, and it's like, your water heater starts leaking, or washing machine, some issue is happening, and it's just
a hose bursts or a toilet. One of our inspectors, top-notch inspector, he's great, newer house in Temecula, his toilet tank cracked while he was at work. Tank broke open and flooded his house just a few weeks ago. And so we're going to set him up as one of our first kind of test houses. And, you put these sensors around, and this device straps onto your meter, and it knows when you're using water or an excessive amount of water, and can turn off your water, so that even if you're not at home, it's better than just being alerted. It can actually proactively shut off your water to avoid the average water leak repair for an insurance company is $55,000. So even though you might be covered, it's very disruptive. I've had my own house flood. So now I sleep better, or especially when we go away, knowing that if there's a problem, and for people who have a second home, vacation home, a short-term rental, they can control the water with their cell phone and turn it on and turn it off, or just be notified if there's a problem. It's really cool stuff.
Wow. Yeah, there's so much stuff. There's so much stuff out there. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this great information. I mean, we talked about a home inspection, what it is, some of the biggest surprises, what are the consideration from different eras of housing to be aware of. We talked about the 3 things to help protect buyers, and then some, or buyers or sellers, and then also talked about just some really cool technology. So we covered a lot of bases. We went a little longer than we planned, but hey, it was so great. So thank you so much again for sharing all this great information. And we'll look forward to helping raise everyone's real estate IQ. And as you guys know, I'm Courtney, and I'm a realtor here in San Diego County. And if there's ever anything I can do to help, I would love to. So just any other questions, feel free to comment below, and we'll get in touch with you. And we're just so happy to share. So have a great rest of your day, and happy Friday.
Bye.
Bye.